Dear friends, I'm Professor Filip Kovacevic, and this is the 29th edition of the Russian newspaper's Monitor. Today, I begin with a very exciting news. I would like to announce the opening of the Newsbud Academy. This is a unique graduate-level educational program that offers clear and impartial answers to the burning political and social questions of our time. What drives the behavior of great powers? Why are some states successful while others fail? What factors can sustain an empire? What are the challenges of the emerging multipolar world in the 21st century? All these questions and many more can be answered if you have a proper theoretical framework. In this one-of-a-kind course with me, Professor Filip Kovacevic, based on years of experience and research, I will argue that geopolitics provides precisely such a framework. So, sign up today and join me for the first Newsbud Academy online course to be held on June 10th and June 11th via newsbud.com. Now, let's take a look at the front page news stories in major Russian newspapers. Today, we'll begin with Izvestia, a moderate pro-government newspaper, the edition for April 14, 2017. On the entire upper part of the front page, there is an article on Syria entitled, "Who Chemicalized Deir-ez-Zor, a town in southeastern Syria not far from the Iraqi border." The subtitle explains that the US-led coalition is being suspected by the Syrian government of bombing an ISIS warehouse containing chemical weapons. Below the subtitle, there is a photograph of a US military plane with a caption, "The official Damascus claims that the bombing of the US-led coalition led to the extensive number of casualties." The article reports that the spokesman for the Syrian Ministry of Defense, Samir Suleiman, stated that on April 12th, the aircraft of the US-led coalition bombed an ISIS warehouse with chemical weapons near the town of Deir-ez-Zor. He said that this attack led to both militant and civilian casualties. In addition, the townspeople saw a thick white-yellow smoke coming out of the area under bombardment. According to Suleiman, this is the sign that ISIS, just like Jabhat al-Nusra, is in the possession of chemical weapons, which are being used against the Syrian army and also against the civilians. However, according to the article, the US-led coalition denied that they made any bombing raids on April 12th. The Russian Ministry of Defense also could not confirm the reports of civilian casualties. Yet, a highly placed diplomatic source, wanting to remain anonymous, said to Izvestia that there was indeed a powerful explosion near Deir-ez-Zor on April 12th, but he could not corroborate the reports of chemical poisons being released into the air. A specialist on chemical weapons contacted by Izvestia stated that yellow smoke could easily be an indication of poisonous chemical substances. According to the article, there were already several instances when the terrorist groups in Syria used chemical weapons against their opponents. However, this is not something that the US-led coalition is willing to accept. and it has preferred to blame the Assad government each and every time. This article also sought a commentary from Senator Franz Klintsevich, one of the most influential lawmakers in Russia, currently the deputy head of the Committee on Defense and Security in the Federation Council, the upper house of the Russian parliament. Klintsevich, who frequently comments on military and intelligence matters, stated that after the attack on Deir-ez-Zor, it is clear who in truth bears the responsibility for the civilian casualties in Idlib on April 4th. In his opinion, the chemical weapons incident was used by the United States to discredit the Syrian and Russian governments' successful efforts against the terrorists, and also to prepare the international public opinion for the eventual overthrow of Assad, his arrest and trial as a war criminal in The Hague. In my opinion, this is something that the Russian government will do its best to prevent at any cost. Assad is the only significant political actor in Syria on whom they can rely in their fight against the terrorists, who also represent a national security threat for Russia itself. The logic of the Russian government is that unless ISIS and other terrorist groups are destroyed in Syria, they will attack the Russian mainland and cause severe damage. This is exactly what we have seen in the last few weeks, including the suicide bombing in St. Petersburg metro. In addition, the ISIS terrorist danger was also the main topic in the recent public speech by the director of the Russian law enforcement and counterintelligence agency FSB, Alexander Bortnikov. It is ironic, but also very revealing, that while Bortnikov focused on the real evil of our time, international terrorism, the director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, in his first public speech, hardly mentioned ISIS, but spent half of his time targeting Julian Assange and WikiLeaks in a rather ominous manner. The whole world could see that the US and Russian intelligence have very different priorities. For the Russians, the choice is stark. It's either Assad in charge of Syria or ISIS in charge of Syria. On the other hand, the US and NATO, heavily assisted by certain Persian Gulf states such as Qatar and Saudi Arabia, seem to prefer the latter option. Now, let's take a look at the front page of Nezavisimaya Gazeta, a middle-of-the-road newspaper, the edition for April 17, 2017. On the bottom of the front page, on the far left, there is an article entitled "Trump Rebuilds the Nuclear Shield in Europe." The subtitle adds that in response to that, Russia is testing a new hypersonic missile named Zircon. The article reports that at the same time that the US has tested a new atomic weapon, B-6112, in Nevada, the Pentagon sent to Europe the newest, fifth-generation aircraft F-35A Lightning II, capable of carrying nuclear missiles. According to the article, these recent developments are worrying Russia, considering that the existing treaty on the reduction of strategic nuclear weapons does not cover the development and testing of US tactical nuclear weapons. The position of US nuclear weapons in Europe is being justified by reference to the alleged Russian threat. The article cites the report of the German television station ZDF, which claimed that about 20 new nuclear weapons are being positioned in Germany. It also refers to the statement of an independent nuclear expert, Hans Christensen, who claimed that the US tactical nuclear weapons are located in several NATO military bases in Europe, Aviano in Italy, Buchel in Germany, Kleine Brogel in Belgium, and Incirlik in Turkey. According to the article, it is evident that the US President Donald Trump has abandoned the critical rhetoric toward NATO and has now signed on the neoconservative NATO policies to further militarize Eastern Europe and the border zones with Russia. This can be seen in the recent transfer of F-35 aircraft to take part in NATO military exercises in this part of the world. These exercises are being conducted on a daily basis and have greatly increased political tensions in Europe. The article cites the commentary of the Russian military expert, General Yuri Netkachov, who stated that Russia was keeping up with the United States in terms of both tactical and strategic nuclear weapons. He noted that in the last couple of weeks, Russia tested a brand new hypersonic anti-ship missile, Zircon, which he claimed that no existing anti-missile shield can take down. The article also quotes the words of the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who stated that the Zircon missile will become, quote, the main weapon of the Russian fleet. Another Russian military expert, Captain Oleg Shvedkov, who served on a Russian nuclear submarine, stated that the Zircon missiles will greatly upgrade the offensive and defensive potential of the Russian Navy, and that no enemy ship had a fighting chance if confronted with these missiles. In my opinion, what we are seeing is the beginning of another arms race between two biggest nuclear powers. This will no doubt make the political and economic situation in Europe extremely tense in the coming period, because the atmosphere of anxiety and fear will thicken. In addition, it will also lead to the further reductions in spending on social services in both the United States and Russia. Austerity will tighten and poverty will increase, but the aggressive generals and the greedy weapons makers will gleefully rub their hands. Moreover, even if there is no intention to actually use nuclear weapons, accidents can always happen, or they can be engineered by rogue factions within the military and intelligence networks. It appears evident that the world is getting closer to another geopolitical incarnation of the Cuban Missile Crisis. In my opinion, the Kremlin is making it clear that it will retaliate using nuclear weapons if there is any type of military attack on Russia, even if only conventional weapons are used, because they also have tremendous destructive potential. This, of course, is the apocalyptic nightmare scenario, which, however, should never be completely excluded from geopolitical analysis, especially now that Donald Trump, whom the Russians are more and more openly describing as unpredictable and irrational, holds the nuclear trigger. Let's stay with Nezavisimaya Gazeta, the middle-of-the-road newspaper, but let's examine the front page of another edition, the edition for April 18, 2017. In the middle of the front page, there is an article with the title, Kiev proposes to declare Transnistria as a state aggressor. Transnistria is a region of Moldova which succeeded in the early 1990s with the assistance of the Russian military forces based there since the Soviet period. The subtitle explains that the parliament of the non-recognized republic plans to ask Russia for help. Under the subtitle, there is a photograph of the Transnistrian president Vadim Krasnoselsky in the company of a high-ranking military officer. The article reports that there are rumors in Transnistria about a renewal of conflict with Moldova, this time with participation of Ukraine as well. This rumor has to do with the news that Moldova and Ukraine plan to open 13 new joint border crossings by October 2017, which are to be located on the Transnistrian part of the border with Ukraine. According to the vice president of the Transnistrian parliament, Galina Antyufeyeva, the leadership of Transnistria is taking this news seriously because it is likely to mean a political and economic blockade for the citizens of the republic. She was not convinced by the words of the president of Moldova, Igor Dodon, even though he is seen by many as a pro-Russian politician, when he said that these border crossings would have no impact on the daily lives of Transnistrians. Dodon's words were also disputed by the representatives of the Kiev government, who obviously want to fight the pro-Russian political tendencies wherever they can find them. The deputy of the Ukrainian parliament, Irina Friz, for instance, stated that due to the Transnistrian close military cooperation and decade-long alliance with Russia, Transnistria should be declared, quote, a state aggressor, and Ukraine should take appropriate measures against it, implying even an armed invasion. According to the article, this has led to a very tense atmosphere in the Transnistrian capital of Tiraspol, where the leadership is considering asking Russia for political and financial help. However, a sizable Russian military detachment is already based there, and so it is clear that any attack on Transnistria will be considered an attack on Russia proper. In my opinion, Moldova is now at a very dangerous geopolitical crossroads. The president Igor Dodon is, as I said, seen as a pro-Russian politician, but the Prime Minister Pavel Filip and the current majority in the Moldovan parliament is pro-NATO and pro-EU. This means that we may see in Moldova another Ukraine sometime soon. In line with the operations Gladio C, which I was the first one to identify, NATO seeks to open a new front against Russia in Moldova and to try to weaken Russia economically and militarily in the year prior to the presidential elections. The fact that the elections for the president of Russia are scheduled for March 2018 must be kept in mind at all times when trying to decipher the US-NATO strategy in the coming period. In a nutshell, the guiding idea in this strategy is to attempt to discredit Putin internationally, while at the same time funneling financial and logistical assistance to the pro-Western and anti-Putin politicians such as Alexei Navalny. However, as I said many times before, there is no way that the majority of Russians for many years to come will accept any politician or political candidate who is associated with the West. The Yeltsin years have taught this generation of Russians that the Western projects for Russia are not to be trusted. This is probably one of the reasons that the protests organized by Navalny have been attended essentially by high school students who were not even born when Yeltsin was president. Ironically, however, they are not even old enough to vote, and so it is difficult to see how they can support Navalny to get elected. Just for you, my listeners, I can already declare that the whole Navalny presidential campaign is a gigantic waste of money of the US and the EU taxpayers. But I'm also quite sure that when Navalny ultimately fails to get elected, nobody in the CIA, the MI6 or NATO will take responsibility for the waste and the faulty intelligence estimates. It will be business as usual for them. And of course, they'll be getting ready for the Russian presidential elections of 2024. On the other hand, Putin will have to think long and hard to find an appropriate successor. This won't be easy. The Russian state remains vulnerable because the process of succession has not been worked out. And the enemies of the Russian state know that and will definitely use this structural weakness to benefit their geopolitical agenda, which is either a subservient Russia, the source of oil and gas for the profit-making multinational corporations, or alternatively, the breakup of Russia. This is why a NATO-planned instability in Moldova is in the offing. We may see harsh political attacks against the pro-Russian President Igor Dodon by the pro-NATO Moldovan political parties, and who knows whether he will remain in office for long. And so, another front of violence is opening up in Eastern Europe. But don't wait for the US mainstream media, for CNN, MSNBC, NBC, and others to tell you about it. Until, of course, NATO paramilitaries and special forces, the Gladio C operatives, get an order to march in and need a propaganda barrage of fake news to justify their actions. Next, we go to the front page of Pravda, the newspaper of the Russian Communist Party, the edition for April 18, 2017. On the top of the front page on the left side, there is an article with the title, "The Black Shadow of the White Legion." The subtitle explains that the details of the attempted color revolution in Belarus by the pro-Western so-called democratic opposition in March of this year have been provided by the Belarus state TV and the newspaper Sovietskaya Belarusia. The article reports on the history of the so-called White Legion, which was formed in the mid-1990s as a military arm of the pro-Western opposition to the regime of Alexander Lukashenko and the formation of the Union State between Russia and Belarus. According to the article, the White Legion established close ties with the Ukrainian pro-fascist movement UNA-UNSO. They trained together and organized violent protests in Minsk in the fall of 1996, when more than 50 police officers were seriously hurt. The White Legion was led by Sergei Chislov, who openly called for terrorist attacks in Moscow. After the breakup of the protests in 1996, Chislov and the leadership of the White Legion fled Belarus and based themselves in Ukraine. They were no doubt assisted by the Western intelligence organizations. In 2014, the Legion emerged again in Kiev and took part in the violent protests and the overthrow of the pro-Russian Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych. This year, they set their sights on Belarus again. This, as I said earlier, is a part of the Gladio C operations against Russia. A video recording of a masked person calling for the violent coup against Lukashenko posted on the internet in March 2017 is attributed to Chislov, who changed his name to Sergei Bulba. The date for the start of the violent outbreak was March 25th, the so-called Day of Freedom, marking March 25, 2018, when a non-Bolshevik Belarus People's Republic was proclaimed. This is not an official holiday in Belarus. This year, it was the year of violence all across the country, and the stashes of weapons and ammunition, obvious preparations for a protracted conflict, have been uncovered since. The attempt to start a Ukrainian-type Maidan in Belarus failed, and most organizers were arrested. It was reported that the main organizer of violence was Nikolai Statkevich, who for years was a close associate of Chislov. In this way, the influence of the extremist White Legion has been confirmed. In my opinion, the March 25th violence was a clear attempt by NATO, CIA, and MI6 forces to force a regime change in Belarus. Lukashenko is seen as a collaborator of Putin, and this is why he has to go. The fact that this would mean the devastation of the country on the model of Ukraine is not the concern of the Western intelligence. The only and ultimate goal is to destabilize and get rid of Putin. One of the key ways to do that is to try to eliminate his political allies in the neighboring countries. As I have said when I spoke of Moldova earlier, the Moldovan President Igor Dodon is one of Putin's allies scheduled for removal. The other is Lukashenko. The third is the President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev. The fourth is the President of Kyrgyzstan, Almazbek Atambayev, and so on. This is why Gladio C operations have been designed by NATO with the help of the CIA and MI6, and they are being put into practice as we speak. However, at least for now, the Gladio C subversion in Belarus has failed. Yet the White Legion is far from being destroyed, and we are likely to see further instability sometime very soon. Lastly today, let's take a look at the Russian semi-tabloid press, the weekly newspaper Argumenty and Fakty, one of the most read Russian newspapers, the edition for April 19, 2017. On the top of the front page on the left side, there is just the title of the article, which continues on page 3. The title states, "A war among states is going on the internet. What are the chances that Russia will win?" The continuation of the article on page 3 is an interview with one of the best-known Russian cyber experts, Igor Ashmanov. Ashmanov states that social media are the ideal means for the manipulation of the minds. He says that the average length of the text on social media has decreased 6 times in the last 10 years. 6 paragraphs is the most that people are willing to read on social media. According to Ashmanov, not a single social media site has an easy-to-use search engine. In other words, people comment on the news, say this and that, and then forget all about it the next day. There is no time and space provided for analysis. In addition, Ashmanov argues that those who know how to position their social media message well can be very successful in either business or politics. He claims that one of the reasons Hillary Clinton lost the US presidential election was that the Trump campaign used more sophisticated social media tactics under the leadership of Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Moreover, the key general issue is that so much personal data is now found on social media, and much of it on the sites controlled by the US-based companies such as Facebook and Google. This opens up tremendous space for espionage and even blackmail. According to Ashmanov, this is something that the Russian government must take into account very seriously, and develop new laws and regulations to protect the personal data of the Russian citizens. Ashmanov states that one's personal data based on one's Facebook profile can be bought for $20, and adds that the US Congress recently passed a law that allows the sale of personal data to companies without notification. He calls on the Russian government to defend its citizens from such abuse of their personal information. Ashmanov also challenges the US mass media myth about the omnipotence of the Russian hackers. He claims that all the information on Hillary Clinton's campaign published by WikiLeaks was not the result of hacking, but was instead based on leaks by the US intelligence insiders. He also thinks that the existence of the Internet is largely conditioned by the intelligence agencies' needs to collect, analyze, and control domestic and global trends. The Internet is a perfect tool for spying on those who are not vigilant enough, and that's the vast majority of the users. According to Ashmanov, the Internet is not only the site of informational warfare, but also of real warfare, as can be seen in the case of the Stuxnet computer worm, an actual cyber weapon which was infiltrated into the Iran's nuclear program and destroyed about 30% of the centrifuges. Ashmanov is also critical of the Bitcoin phenomenon and argues that it is mostly used to traffic in illegal substances and services. He implies that Bitcoin was developed by the US hackers working in tandem with the US intelligence networks and should not be legalized in Russia. In my opinion, what we get from Ashmanov is the view of the vast majority of Russian computer and cyber experts. They are wary of the US influence in cyberspace and are deeply engaged in helping the Russian government defend its national security interests. They are definitely Russian patriots. This means that we will soon see the increase in open and covert cyber conflicts, especially between Russia and the United States, but also between China and the United States. What impact this will have on the prospects of alternative media remains to be seen. In any case, let's enjoy it while we can. Therefore, please support our Kickstarter campaign and consider becoming a member of the Newsbud community. Where else can you get the front page news stories from the major Russian newspapers except here? Dear friends, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and of course, be cool and stay cool until the next edition of the Russian newspapers Monitor.
This is a special announcement. Newsbud is proud to offer something you won't find on other news sites. Welcome to Newsbud Academy. For the first time, Newsbud is offering online courses brought to you by the top experts in their field, while academia across the US are attempting to train people to handle fake news. Newsbud Academy will bring graduate-level learning right into your home, without the burden of expensive student loans. Newsbud Academy is for everyone. Whether you are already an expert or just getting started, Newsbud Academy will provide you with the tools that you need to fully understand the important issues. Want a better understanding of the complicated world that we live in? Want to know what's really going on geopolitically? The Newsbud Academy is for you. The first course offered by Newsbud Academy is the Foundation of Anglo-American and Russian Geopolitics, hosted by Professor Filip Kovacevic. Professor Filip Kovacevic has taught all over the globe. He has been invited to lecture throughout the US, Europe, and the former Soviet Union. Professor Kovacevic currently teaches at the University of San Francisco. At Newsbud, he is a senior geopolitical analyst and hosts a weekly show, the Russian Newspaper Monitor. Professor Kovacevic will be in studio at Newsbud headquarters to bring you the first Newsbud Academy. The aim of this course is to provide conceptual tools to understand, explain, and predict political events which are shaking to the core the political status quo all across the world, especially in Europe and Asia. The first Newsbud Academy will be offered on the weekend of Saturday, June 10th and Sunday, June 11th, but the enrollment period starts now, and space is limited, so do not wait. Go to newsbud.com or click the link below to register today. Your registration includes the full Newsbud Academy Geopolitical course hosted by Professor Filip Kovacevic. The course will be 6 hours long, spread over 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, 3 hours each day, and will include a live Q&A session with the professor each day. You will also receive a certificate of completion and a DVD of the course, plus a Newsbud hat. Registration is limited for the Newsbud Academy, so go to newsbud.com for more information and sign up today.